Actually, good afternoon. Welcome to. Actually, good afternoon. Welcome to the CCG VIP Luncheon. Actually, this is a serious luncheon of the CCG. We invited the distinguished guests from the embassies, from our young leaders today here. We just concluded our Global Young Leaders Dialogue annual forum this morning. So in this occasion, we also invited our young leaders from this morning's conference. The CCG VIP Luncheon Series features the distinguished scholars, policymakers, and the people from the embassies to China to participate in this the luncheon to introduce and do more exchanges on the China's policy, especially on the economic circle and the development and the further discussions on the future development of China's economy. Actually, in the past several times, we already invited some ministers and ambassadors to participate. This time, we are so honored to have two distinguished keynote speakers. They are Mr. Jordan Liu, who is a professor of Peking University, BOYA Distinguished Professor of Economics, Dean of Peking University Institute for Global Health and Development. Another distinguished speaker is Professor Ma Jun, who is a founder and the president of the Institute of Finance and Sustainability, IFS. We also invited the founder and president of Center for China and Globalization, former counselor to the State Council of China, Dr. Yao Wang, to participate in this luncheon. So our luncheon will conducted several parts. The first part is we welcome Dr. Wang to have the welcome remarks. Later, we invite the two keynote speakers to deliver their points. And I think the most interesting part is we are going to have the Q&A process. We would like to take the question. The luncheon, CCG VIP luncheon is a very open, liberal occasion. We would like to invite you to raise a short question to our keynote speakers and to conduct the candid dialogue. First of all, I would like to invite Dr. Henry Yao Wang to have the opening remark. Thank you.
Your Excellencies and Global Young Leader Dialogue participants, and also friends from Beijing foreign community. And so this is really, again, this is already the seventh CCG VIP luncheon that CCG has been conducting for the last 8 months, 7-8 months already. So this is really an important gathering because every VIP luncheon we invite very renowned and very well-known China international expert to share their perspective and share their expertise, and also related with China and outside the world. So this is very, very important, and it's actually an occasion that we've conducted. For the last number of years, we actually always happen, but this year we have systematically organized a series of these luncheons, almost like every 3 weeks we have one. We have already 7 of them since May already to now. So today, of course, we had Dr. Jordan Liu and we had Dr. Ma Jun. You know, both of them are very renowned experts in China. Dr. Liu is professor at the Peking University and a well-known top global health expert in China, and has a very legendary experience. He's from Sichuan. I know he's also a very unique experience, and has studied in the U.S., went there, and also come back for a long time. So he's head of a Beijing Peking University Global Health Development Institute, if I remember correctly. very renowned expert on global health in China. So I have been saying, Gordon, you should come to give us a talk. And great, and now he has time finally to join us. So we'll hear from him a bit later. But of course, we had Dr. Ma Jun, another famous Chinese expert on green financing. Also, he's the head of the institute of this green financing. But more importantly, he was also director of the research at the People's Bank of China quite a number of years ago. I remember when even before that, he worked at quite a few investment banking as the chief economist. So he's both of them are very impressive. And of course, we have other experts here. We have Bernard. He's the global health envoy from German government, based in the embassy in Beijing. And of course, he's also the former chief representative of WHO in China. And he actually knows China so well, and he's become a well-known figure also in the Chinese diplomatic community. And of course, we have quite a few others guests from deputy head from Turkey, we have people from the Egyptian embassy, we have a number of, I think we have a list on the table, you can take a look. And so many diplomats, and also we have this morning we have a professor from Tsinghua University on AI as well, so we have benefited quite a lot. So this is actually one of our largest lunch gatherings. Normally we have 20, maximum 30-some people. This time we have 40 of them, so it's quite a big one. So I think it's important at this critical juncture that we have this open dialogue, because we're going to put it online also for luncheon, and it's really a great platform, not only for people who enjoy our lunch, but also for people who have to be here, but they can also hear later from our YouTube streaming and posting. So that's one of the strengths of CCG, that we are actually quite transparent, quite open, and then we have many diplomats and many people coming to our event, because this is a very international platform, very open dialogue, and very transparent communication. And we also hear many great young leaders at this event. A lot of good ideas we heard already so far. But so we would like to hear top expert. But this is, of course, the top expert will kick off the luncheon event. But as a matter of fact, we want to hear the roundtable discussion. We want to hear the your opinions. You just raise your flag, and Dr. Miao will pick you to speak and host the lunch for today, and then we'll hear as many of you as possible. So this is a really great event, and we really look forward for the exciting discussion. So probably, without further ado, I'd like to invite Professor Gordon Liu to give your first talk, and then we will ask Professor Ma Jun to have the second view, and then we'll probably hear from Bernard, from our embassy representative, but also, of course, our young leaders, and also, of course, David Morris already talked in the morning. He's a UN expert for sustainable development. So we have quite a few, we also have people from different government and young leaders, and we'd love to really to hear from all of you. And so thank you all very much. I'd like to pass the floor to Dr. Liu now.
Thank you, Harry, for inviting me to join this CCG Luncheon event. I'm so honored and so happy to be here today, especially when I see so many young leaders from around the world. That's a very big, surprising gift to me for my talk. I also like to thank you for allowing me to speak first on the vital topic of wealth, health, and planetary limits. which are obviously crucial for human development. So in October 2024 this year, the Lancet published a commission study led by economists Dean Jansen and Larry Summers, together with several dozen global leaders, calling for greater investment in health for economic prosperity and a human health mission of so-called 50 by 50. Such an initiative aims to have global premature mortality before age 70 by 50% by 2050. So along this line, as one of the commissioners, I am so honored to share some of my thoughts below on actions that may be needed to help transform this noble mission into reality that is sustainable economically, socially, politically, and environmentally. Okay, so first, wealth. Wealth and health are undoubtedly the two cornerstones of human progress and development. The Industrial Revolution, driven by scientific breakthrough and innovation, was a catalyst that ushered in the era of modern economic growth. This powerful engine finally propelled humanity out of the persistent poverty trap that had hindered human development since its inception. According to a UC Berkeley economist, he once estimates over the approximately 250 years to 1750, the average global income has experienced an astonishing 37-fold increase. While the greater benefits of modern economic growth are so evident, we cannot ignore the escalating costs. These costs manifest in complex and challenging issues, while often striving to join a race of overall GDP growth in the short run. Many state-led entities tend to overlook the law of diminishing returns on capital investment in the long run. Such a tendency of ignorance can be very costly over time, not only by violating the basic economic principle of marginal cost and the marginal benefit being equal, if you have ever taken economic one, but also by incurring increasing costs in many other ways. So below I will just touch upon a few of them for illustration. First, there is the imbalance in consumption between the rich and the poor. Okay. Well, many of us are so fortunate enough to enjoy high living standards. It is not uncommon sometimes to find our closets too small to store many unused clothes and shoes. And sometimes we find our stomach too small to eat more than what we wish. A consequence of overconsumption, isn't it? Meanwhile, the degree of scarcity for living conditions is so astonishing among poor households in many remote areas. In response, following the law of diminishing marginal utility from consumption, we would be all better off if we could better distribute income a bit more towards the disadvantaged groups. Overconsumption also costs us by depleting much of our finite resources at alarming rate, leading to biodiversity loss as countless species struggle to survive in the habitats being destroyed or altered. My second point is to emphasize the importance of investing in human capital, with education and health serving as the two cornerstones. For less developed countries, as we know, a wealth of solid research in empirical evidence has proven that improving public education and health is the most promising way out of poverty and towards prosperity. China, in fact, has set a good example in this regard. Even for well-developed countries like the United States, where average income is far higher than that of most other countries, college education has been found to be a game changer for adults suffering from the death of despair and leading to a more prosperous life, as well documented by Princeton economists Ann Case and Angus Stevens in their best-selling book of Death of Despair and the Future of Capitalism. I don't know how many of you have read. If not, I strongly recommend you read this book. I actually helped wrote the preface for this book. My final point on growth focuses on the daunting costs of greenhouse emissions, which Dr. Ma will address more of it later, which are responsible for growing climate change recently, resulting in problems such as rising temperature, extreme weather events, and sea level rise. According to the 2015 Paris Agreement, the global temperature increase should be kept below 1.5 degrees Celsius, above pre-industrial levels. However, you may know or you may not know, the bad news is that the increase has already reached nearly 1.48 degrees Celsius as of the latest data, resulting from continued record high temperature year after year, as we've all experienced recently, no matter where you are. Unfortunately, the international community is still struggling to reach a viable and accountable, actionable consensus on addressing these challenging issues, as witnessed in the COP29. On top of climate changes, uncontrolled pollutions add to these costs at an alarming rate, together acting like a ticking time bomb that could have far-reaching consequences for our future growth and human development. Health, on the other hand, has benefited tremendously from modern economic growth. The advancements span not only an increase in life expectancy, but also a significant enhancement in quality of life. Over the past century, life expectancies have more than doubled for most countries around the world. This remarkable transformation can be primarily attributed to improved living conditions, public health measures, and modern medical technologies. Interestingly, while modern economic growth has led to a widening income gap between the rich and poor countries, health development seems to be following a path of convergence, which is the good news. Poor countries are gradually catching up with wealthier ones in terms of key health indicators such as life expectancy and infant mortality rates. However, the journey towards human health is not without its hurdles and challenges. Healthcare inflation is a persistent global issue, especially in the US. Since the 1970s, the growth rate of healthcare costs has outstripped economic growth in almost every country, including China. One of the main drivers of this trend is the continuous adoption and integration of new medical technologies. Additionally, we also need to find the optimal balance in allocation of resources for extending life years versus improving quality of life. We also need to balance our efforts between preparing for future pandemics, which obviously will require significant investment in research, surveillance, and infrastructure, and managing current chronic disease conditions, which account for most of the global disease burden. Finally, we must navigate the trade-offs between high carbon and low carbon alternatives across the board, including healthcare systems ranging from basic research to manufacturers to supply chain and service delivery. And my final emphasis will be put on planetary limits. To ensure the long-term prosperity of human civilization, it is essential that we continue to pursue wealth accumulation and health development within the boundaries and the constraints set by our planetary system. Right? To achieve this overarching goal, humanity must undergo a fundamental shift in its growth paradigm. We need to transition from a model of crude and unrestricted use, as I alluded earlier, to one that is more rational, sustainable, and in harmony with the natural limits of our planet. Scientific research has identified 9 crucial natural boundaries that define a safe operating space for humanity. Among these, climate change, biodiversity loss, land system change, geochemical flows, and freshwater use are the ones closest to their critical thresholds. Moreover, human development is also influenced not only by ecological factors, but also by social, economic, and political forces. As we speak, we are currently witnessing an increase in geopolitical tensions, regional conflicts, and cultural conflicts. These issues can significantly influence our ability to implement sustainable development strategies. In October 2024, Peking University embarked on a grant-making project called Planetary Health Access System, or PHAS. This digital system is designed to track each country's position in real time in relation to planetary health limits. It measures not only human health, but also animal health, as we eat most of the time, natural health, and social health. As a global digital tool, the PHAS holds great promise by providing accurate and up-to-date information on how different countries are faring in terms of planetary health. It will enable policymakers, researchers, and stakeholders to make more informed decisions. It will help us identify areas where immediate action is required and develop strategies that enhance the overall sustainability of our continued journey towards greater heights in the long run. To continue human civilization and health development, we must integrate economic viability with ecological sustainability. The PP University PHAS framework has great potential to offer in this regard by helping better leverage scientific advancements and promoting global collaboration. The Peking University research team is striving to make a global launch of the PHAS system in early 2025, so watch it. When the PHAS becomes available as a global public good, we can gain a deeper understanding of the very complex relationships between wealth, health, and planetary limits. I hope some of our young leaders will eventually join PK University PHAS project. Thank you so much.
Great. Thank you, Professor Liu, for the excellent presentation. I think you have aroused a lot of the discussions. I actually want to formally introduce also Dr. Liu. He's actually a Peking University BOYA Distinguished Professor of Economics at the International School, CCG National School of Development, and the Dean of the Peking Institute of Global Health and Development. So he's very senior there. He's a director of Peking China Center for Health, Economic Research, and a fellow of Chinese Academy of Medicine, and co-organizer of U.S.-China Track 2 Dialogue on Health. And he served on China State Council Health Reform Advisory Commission, and is associate director of academic journals including China Economic Quarterly, Health Economics, and editor-in-chief of China Journal of Pharmaceutical Economics. So you can see he has a very impressive track record. And of course, prior to his joining the Peking University, he was a full-time faculty at the University of South California, and the University of North Carolina, at Chapel Hill. He was also the president of Chinese Economic Society at the U.S. and Asia Pacific Foundation. So many more. He has a very, very long CV. So I really appreciate what has been suggested here. But we're going to hear later of this we'll have a dialogue, a conversation. But I would like to also emphasize we have another very important guest today presented here. Obviously, is Martin Taylor. He's the chief representative of the World Health Organization in China. So we are very pleased to welcome Martin Taylor to join us also. Thank you. So next, I'd like to introduce our next speaker, Dr. Ma Jun. He's the founder and president of the Institute of Finance and Sustainability. So this is a well-known institute. Of course, he actually also the chairman of the Green Finance Committee on China's Society of Financing and Banking, chairman of the Capacity Building Alliance and Sustainable Investment, and chairman and president of Hong Kong Green Finance Association, co-chair of the IPSF working group, and co-chair of the steering committee of the Green Investment Principles for the Belgian role, and member of China National Environment Expert Committee. So it's many more. I mean, Dr. Ma is also another figure as well. Dr. Ma was formerly of the co-chair of the G20 Sustainable Financing Working Group from 2016 to 2023, a member of the steering committee of the central banks and supervisor networks for green and financial system, and a member of the monetary committee of People's Bank of China, and chief economist and research bureau at the PBOC from 2014 to 2017. So, and of course, he was the managing director, chief economist of investment strategy, Greater China for Deutsche Bank, the senior economist and consultant for the World Bank. And so you can see a really impressive track record. So I would like to really invite Dr. Ma to share his perspective for the audience here from the young adults, but also from the diplomatic community. So Dr. Ma, please.
Thank you very much, Henry, for the kind and long introduction. I'd like to start by telling you a story of how I converted myself from an economist, I used to be economist in the banking sector for 20 plus years, into an environmentalist. That was 10 years ago when I joined the Chinese Central Bank and became the chief economist, which began my journey towards building the green financial system in China and also international green finance related initiatives. 10 years ago in Beijing, if some of you were here, you're probably wearing masks. And the reason is not COVID, it's the PM 2.5. To many of you know PM 2.5, I'm sure Martin knows, but any of these young fellows, anyone who doesn't know PM 2.5? Okay, no problem. And so I know many of you are health specialists. At that time, in fact, 2013, when I was giving a lecture in Beijing, and at that time I was representing Deutsche Bank. I was chief economist for the region. I was speaking to a big crowd, 500 people in other countries, investors. And I was speaking at a podium, and these 200 guys there. And at point of time, their coughing was louder than my voice. I couldn't hear myself. So really, forced me to think of what's happening. And that day, we figured that the PM 2.5 went to 1,000. Yeah, you know the WHO sort of safe level is 25. And I think someone was telling me it's 5, right? One was telling me 2 months ago. 1,000 versus 25. So, and that evening I began to rethink my career. I had 20 plus years in banking, investment banking, helping mobilizing money for companies. And these companies make a lot of money. And these are all what I now believe are dirty companies. They are making money from coal-fired power generation, from steel, from cement, from petrochemical. All of these are heavy emitting companies. Yet, they were very profitable. They're more profitable than any green companies. Than solar, wind, electric vehicles, water treatment, and the solid waste treatment companies. So I realized something is wrong in the system. And the system which allocates financial resources, basically money, to different parts of the economy, has a wrong signal. And sends a wrong signal to the money owner that you have to go to the polluting sectors because it's going to make you a lot more money. Including ourselves, we as brokers, we make money. Because the polluting company makes money, we charge them commission. And we're making X% of their money that way. So that was a systematic problem in the entire financial system, not just of China, but globally. And the second year I had the opportunity to join the Chinese Central Bank as chief economist. And I did quite a few things. The other few things are not that interesting. There was only one thing which is interesting and had a long-lasting impact, is to set up the green financial system. What we did was initially to convince the top level officials that we need to do this, right? And the way we convince them is not climate. Climate is today's topic. At that time, it was really about pollution. And the boss in the central leading group of economic finance, which is the advisor to President Xi, listened to my sort of presentation, and I said, you need 4 trillion RMB every year to fix pollutions, including air pollution, water pollution, land contamination, all of which Dr. Liu has mentioned, right? It's part of the health problem for the planet. And how much money you need? You need 4 trillion RMB every year. How much money you have? Less than 10%. And who is going to give you 90% of 3.5 trillion? I'm going to mobilize that money for you. We do this in the banking system. We ask all the auditors put it into the banking system, and we package them in a way that they will channel to green projects only. This is what we call green finance. And this guy's so happy. He said, I wonder that I need to spend so much money on all the projects, and I don't know where the money should be coming from. And you are coming to the right point for the right subject. So second half of this year, my proposal of setting up a green financial system is written into the central government document. It's called Eco-Solution Plan, Article 45. Then it became a mandate for the central bank to really spell out the details of this vision into a document what we call Green Finance Guideline. Then I spent really 1 year in the second half of 2015 and early 2016 leading the drafting group of 7 different ministries. And we developed 35 actions on green finance in China. And that's the first green finance policy framework in China and in the world. Now, of course, lots of OECD countries have done green finance products many years ago, 20-something years ago. But they were doing this in what I call a bottom-up approach. Meaning the investor wants a green bond, and someone will create a green bond for them. And that's essentially the private sector sort of led initiative. But in China, we did it top down. The government wants to mobilize 4 trillion, and we will tell all the financial institutions, including the banks, asset managers, insurance companies, follow our line and channel the money into the green sector. And that was 2016. We published officially the Chinese Green Finance Guideline. Now it's 8 years past, and China has developed the largest green lending market in the world. It's 35 trillion RMB outstanding, which is equivalent to about 5.5 trillion US dollars. And that's outstanding, meaning the money has been lent, has not received the principal and the interest back yet. In terms of flow, it's much bigger because 7 8 years ago we lent out the money, and 5 years ago we put the principal interest. So I think cumulatively we probably have lent like 100 trillion RMB already to green projects in the last 8 years or so. And now, what did this green finance products do? They supported the massive growth of the real green economy. And just give you 3 examples. Number one, the solar wind sector, the renewable energy sector. China now 50% of global total installation of solar wind capacity. And the second example is electric vehicles. And China is now producing 60% of global electric vehicles. And we're probably selling more because certain other countries as well. And thirdly, it's a battery. The battery goes to the EVs, right? And it goes to many other storage facilities that need to stabilize the unstable renewable energy into power that can be used by the grids. So Chinese battery is 70% of the global total. And behind that is green finance, because all of these projects need money. And we provide them with divine money, cheap money, and money with a label, which is called green. And now this is what we've been doing in the past 8 9 years within the Chinese financial system on greening the operation. And the next stage, the green finance extension, is what we call transition finance. The pure green activities that I just mentioned, like solar, wind, battery, and electric vehicles, they account for only 10% of GDP. The 90% GDP are still dirty. They're still polluting, they're still carbon intensive, they're harming the nature. What should we do? And we should convert them into green. So instead of completely building a greenfield project, which is solar and wind, we will turn the coal-fired power generation company into green company. We turn the steel company, which is very carbon intensive, into a company that produces zero carbon steel. And we will produce zero carbon cement. And we will produce zero carbon plastics in the future. This is what we call transition of carbon intensive companies. And that's really about 90% of GDP. So in that stage, transition finance is a much bigger deal. And we began to do that in 2022 by setting up the transition finance framework. And now 22 provinces and cities in China have developed a transition taxonomy, which is a list of transition activities, 100, 200 items, which will help with the carbon-intensive activities to decarbonize. For example, the steel sectors, you have a few pathways. You can use scrap steel to produce steel instead of iron ore to produce steel, which is not good for Australia, I guess. But they decarbonize in a big way, right? You can use green power to produce steel. You can use hydrogen to produce steel. And all of these will decarbonize. So all these pathways listed in the big table is what we call transition pathways, list of transition pathway or taxonomy. And based on taxonomy, we're now driving money into these activities. And these financing instruments called transition financing instruments. So these are just a short stories of what's going on in China in the green finance space. And now there are a few items which are very interesting globally, not just in a single country. Because all these arrangements, especially the standards, the disclosure requirements, they are what I call global public goods in nature in green finance space. So you don't need, for example, a standard setting, 200 countries defining green activities in 200 different ways. Indeed, if you define 200 different sort of a list of green activities that's different, then it's very harmful for cross-border green capital policy. And as I said, in China, we were first to launch a green finance policy framework, which included the definition of green. And I was the guy in 2015 leading the drafting of the first Chinese green finance taxonomy, which is a list of 38 items that's considered green. Then 3 years later, EU developed the green taxonomy. And I knew that the EU definition of green is different from the Chinese definition of green. And if the EU thinks your green is not my green, so what's going to happen? Then the Chinese green finance products, for example, green bond, cannot be sold in Europe. But just like electronics, China made this electronic once, and we think it's safe, and EU don't think it's safe. Then you cannot sell in Europe. So we need to harmonize the definition of standards for green finance products. So who is going to take a lead to do that? And I think we should do that. Because China is the largest green finance market, and Europe is also a very large green finance market. So 4 or 5 years ago, we began a dialogue between China and Europe, saying, hey, can we talk about forming a common taxonomy, a unified taxonomy to define what is green? And let's recognize between China and Europe. Not initially involving 180 countries, because 180 guys' negotiation is too difficult. It's going to drag on and on for decades. But 2 guys talking to each other. It was a success. And I've been co-chairing this taxonomy working group between China and Europe in the last 4 years. 2 years ago, we came up with a common ground taxonomy, which is recognized both by China and EU. And this taxonomy, I guess Susan knows, it's a labeling device. And in the last 2 years, most of the Chinese issuing green bonds in the international market use this common ground taxonomy as a labeling tool. They put a sticker saying this is CGT aligned. Then the European guys will buy them. We don't need to do a duplication or double verification against the 2 different standards. And why it can become a global public goods? Because the world needs one definition of green, right? Instead of just the China-European reaching agreement, we need to reach agreement with everybody in the world. And that's why last year we invited Singapore to join. And 2 weeks ago, I was in Baku attending to the COP29. I represented the working group announced a new version of the Common Ground Taxonomy, which is called multi-jurisdiction Common Ground Taxonomy. It's called 3 parties. China, Europe, and Singapore agree on the same definition. And that's one step forward towards a global harmonization. And next, I'm going to invite Indonesia, Brazil, Australia, and the UK to join this common ground taxonomy. So over time, you can see how international harmonization can take place. We need a couple of leaders, and we need a few more guys who are willing. This is called coalition willing. Once 8 or 9 major countries are on board, then everybody else will join. You don't need to invite them. They will come, and they will knock on the door. And this is a global public good which we are driving. Now, just give a second example of global public good which we initially initiated last year that's called Capacity Building for Green Finance in Developing Country Emerging Markets. As I said, in the last 10 years, China grew massively on green financing. OECD is also doing very well, especially Europe. But you don't see much of progress in other developing country emerging markets. You compare a number, which is called green loan ratio. In one of the Chinese pilot cities for green finance, the green loan ratio is 34%, meaning 34% of the loans green. Yeah, 34% out of the total loans are green. In other developing countries, on average, it's only 3%. So it's 10 times less green. The other 97% still go to green intensive activities. So how do we help them? We know that a lot of experience has been developed in other countries, including China, Europe, and so on. They're supposed to be public goods. They should be transferred to the other developing countries who wanted to utilize these standards, disclosure requirements, financing tools, and so on. So end of last year, my team launched the Capacity Alliance of System Investment, which is a consortium of 60-something global institutions, jointly providing China training services for developing country emerging markets. And our aim is set very high at training 100,000 green finance specialists in developing country emerging markets. But it's achievable. And year to date, we have trained 5,000 people already. My team is going around the world. That's why I'm busy spending time outside China. My team and myself were in Brazil early this year. We also were in Doha, and we're in Azerbaijan, we're in Hong Kong. And early next year, we'll be hosting events in South Africa and in Malaysia, and we'll be doing this in Hungary. So all these activities are ongoing. We have now built a team of 15 people doing this only, global training of sustainable finance specialists. In addition to face-to-face training, which is very costly, we bring like 300 people to one room for a few days. And we're now developing an online version of the training program, which we're aiming to put in 100 hours of content. It's essentially a university online on green finance. And how do we leverage our members' ability and resources? As I said, we have 60 institutional members globally, all the big banks, NGOs, international organizations, they are members. Whoever has knowledge on green finance, I think largely our members already. So we're not necessarily producing the knowledge by ourselves. We're not reinventing the wheel, but we source the knowledge from members. We rewrite, repackage, and put them online, and we use AI to read the script, and we'll make it much more efficiently delivering to a much larger audience than face-to-face learning. And that's why last week I was in Baku, and one of the members sitting in the room was joking with me, saying, "Hey, Dr. Ma, you set a target of training 100,000 people. That's too modest. Why don't you set a target of training 1 million people with your online platform?" Which is possible, because the marginal cost of delivering the course online, once it's completed, it's going to be zero. That's why for this forum, I think it's a good opportunity for me to advertise this online platform as well, because we want everybody, every country who is interested in utilizing our online learning on green finance to approach us. And we have a colleague here who can reach out, raise your hand. She can distribute our cards and all of that. And in case yourself, your institution, your country, especially your finance-related organizations and guys who want to work with us, and we'll be very happy to set up a sort of a network of delivering our knowledge to your countries. And so far, we have covered about 70 countries already. We still have one year. Our goal is to cover 140 countries. So I guess with that, let me thank you, Henry, again for inviting me to, and we'll enjoy the conversation afterwards. Thank you.
Great, thank you, Dr. Ma, for a very comprehensive and very encouraging, also stimulating presentation. Actually, I echo what you have said about pollution in Beijing 10-15 years ago. As I also mentioned, that we found that actually the Beijing pollution, they studied, 60% was coming from emission of automobiles. So now they started the green EV cars, and then China now has actually come back to that more sustainable development. And then China now is 90%, 80% of the EV and green power and batteries and solar panel. So this is really a blessing, but there's no oversupply. You know, according to the International Energy Agency, we need 820 gigawatts of green power every year, and only got a quarter of that. And we need to spend $4.5 trillion on green spending. We only spend $1.8 trillion. So it's far from oversupply or overcapacity. So I think the subject we're having today is we have two top experts on global health, and then this green development is really beneficial to the health of the people. And then the China people life expectancy is now longer than the U.S. citizen. It's a surprise. It's real. I'm sure Beijing life expectancy is also benefit from this green sustainable development. So maybe we'd like to hear from our WHO chief representative and also later our German health envoy on this subject. So Dr. Mel will chair the next section.
Thank you, Henry's introduction, and thank you all, both of the distinguished experts. One is on the green financing, another is on the global health management. Though both are very important, I agree, I echo with what Henry said. Actually, the world is intertwined, and the global SDGs are intertwined as well. Like the global health crisis intertwined with the green finance and development, sustainable development. I would like to take questions, and you can shoot questions to our experts. But before that, maybe Martin or Bernard, would you like to add some words?
Thank you. Thank you very much, and thank you to both of the speakers. I think you've not only set the scene well in terms of the global challenges, but also given us a little bit of a flavour of some of the action that is taking place. If I may, maybe just I think two quick reflections, and then an open question. The first question, the first reflection. It's sometimes easy to forget when we sit in a room like this having a nice lunch actually how important health is to people. So let's just start with the basic reminder. Health is important to all of us, and if you think back to the last time you were sick yourself, or you had a family member or a friend who needed health care, it's probably not that long ago. And that causes a lot of anxiety for us, it causes concern, and for many people in the world it forces their families into poverty. Or they have to choose not to send their children to school because of the cost of healthcare. So every year at the moment, approximately 1 billion people risk falling into absolute poverty because of the cost of healthcare. And a further 1.3 billion risk falling into relative poverty. So that's a significant proportion of the world's population. And Gordon, in his presentation, outlined the fact that although the world is converging in terms of life expectancy, there are these huge inequalities and disparities between countries and within countries. So I think that's something worth remembering, the intrinsic value that we all place in health. The second reflection is the interconnectedness, and both of the speakers have spoken about that. And maybe to pick up on what Professor Mahjong was just saying in terms of, excuse me, air quality in Beijing. We know because of the improvements in the last 10 years in air quality in Beijing, first of all, that it was actually concerns about health was one of the key factors that the government made the efforts to make those changes. We know that there's been a significant reduction in disease in Beijing, both lungs and hearts in particular, as a result of that. That means people are living longer, it means people are living better lives, it also means a lower burden on the healthcare system. It means lower healthcare costs. What that means when we think about the interconnection of health with other parts of society is that people don't have to spend that money on healthcare. So they can spend that money on other consumption. They can spend that money on school books, on food, on other important aspects of the economy. So the interconnections go very deep, and they go both ways, very much both ways. And I think both speakers have emphasised that, but I wanted to just lay out that thread a little bit to show in detail how those sort of interconnections work. And we can see that in many, many other issues. So I think those are the two reflections from listening to both of the speakers. The question I have to them, and it could be to anybody, is listening to both of you, I kind of hear a bit glass half full, glass half empty, in the sense that we have these planetary limits, and we know that our health and the planet's health are intertwined. And you reminded us, Gordon, that we're getting pretty close to 1.5. And I think for most lay observers, we feel like we're not seeing enough political commitment or action to stick below 1.5. Why is that? Or are we in a different situation? And I was very inspired, actually, Professor Martin, with your comments about the green financing, bringing in, looking at the root of the system and trying to change from the inside. So does that mean that we should have some confidence that bit by bit things will change and we'll still stay below 1.5? Or is it going to be too little too late? So I'd be interested to get your reflections on that. Thank you.
Thank you, Martin. You raised very innovative questions and intertwined both expertise. Maybe Bernard, would you add more some? Over there.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you very much also, first for the invitation and the two excellent speeches. Thank you, Martin. Obviously, we share a lot of common ground and we've been working together. Maybe just one, also picking up on your last question, also personal reflection on, especially on the pollution, which was really dramatic. And I remember when I was there doing my first assignment, it was very interesting because the air was already very bad. I remember the first time I rode my bike to my office it was just a kilometer, an old flying pigeon, cranky bike, and the air was, I thought that there's a lot of fog in the air, right? And of course it was pollution. It was really, really heavy pollution. It was about 400 and whatever. And then there was a period when the US Embassy tweeted the AQI levels on Twitter, which of course was not accessible easily in China, but people found ways around. And all of the energy went into stopping that Twitter by the Chinese government. And then they found new ways, and it went back and forth, back and forth. Everybody tried to fight those values. So people knew that the air was bad, but it was not possible to talk about it. But then suddenly something changed. And suddenly, I think, also the government realized that everybody is suffering from that. Right? I mean, everybody is going to die there, suffering. And maybe a very quick anecdote, but when we opened our new office in the beginning of 2014, we had a little press conference. It was really bad air outside. It was above 100. I remember very well that day. And I got asked by a smart journalist from Australia, so Dr. Schwartz, do you think this air pollution is an emergency? And I said, yes, of course it's an emergency, just look outside. Which was, of course, a trap, because if the WHO head declares an emergency, that has massive implications, right? I mean, you shouldn't do that lightly. And what did I do? Two things I did. The first thing, I called my office, my head office in Geneva, and said, I did something. And said, yeah, we already heard, we're going to look at it. The second thing, I called the DG of the International Health Office of the NHC. And I told him, my friend, I just said this, you're absolutely right. It is an emergency. The point I'm going to make is there was suddenly a shift that, it is something that, really affects everybody, every single person, whether you're rich or poor, living in the city. And not too long after, it wasn't because what I said, I guess, but maybe because I had a little contribution, but because there was a realization that unless there's a fundamental change, you know, millions of people will die, children will have massive effects on their brain development, and all of these things will happen. And the Vice Premier called for a war in pollution during the Yanghui, which was the starting point for a massive shift. And then there were Chinese outlets that tweeted every day the pollution levels. So there was a massive shift, which was, you know, I think, realization of a social need and a health need, which is really the most important. And second, it was an expression of clear political leadership, which is what you're getting at. And I think they have a very similar, and we see the results. I mean, the results are massive. I mean, when we have a day of where the values go up to 200, we really feel bad. But we have many days of 400 plus and up to 1,000, as was said before. So I think the political leadership is so critical, and the question is how can we go there? And you talked about sort of the coalition of the willing. We will start with something, which is so difficult today, but also I would like to highlight that. I want to make a second and really think, how can we get there? How can we overcome, you know, these geopolitical tensions, all these discussions? Because as it comes to global warming, this is, you know, the world, every single person in the world is the same, right? And we have to act that way. A very quick comment on the economic discussion, and I think, Gordon, in a sense you said this, you said a similar thing. The GDP is sort of the holy grail measurement of development in the world. I would postulate, which is the most important. So if you talk to policymakers, to governments, they always say that GDP is the most important indicator for development. I want to challenge that. It cannot be the growth in money and wealth. That's the most important. It has to be health and life of people. Now, that shouldn't be a contradiction. And in the course of this discussion, I think we also at WHO used, you know, examples where health actually contributed to an increase in GDP. So we said, you have to, you know, invest in health so the GDP gets higher. But I think we need to turn this upside down and say we need an economy that supports health, because it goes together. And only once we get to that point, and I think, you know, we both said something like that. I mean, only if we look into new indicators that actually include healthy development, and that's planetary healthy development, we will be able to succeed. We have to get away from this very, very narrow interpretation of development and
Thank you, Bernard. Yeah, I agree with you what said that the green GDP. I remember a few years ago in China, many policymakers mentioned the green GDP, but recent few years I haven't heard about that. But maybe Professor Mark can give some feedback later. I would like to take questions together, and both of you can give those answers collectively. Are there some questions from our other audiences, the young leaders? Any question? Yeah, before this question came, introduce yourself briefly.
Sure, thanks for the opportunity. So my name is Gareth. I'm a Schwarzman Scholar at Tsinghua University, and I'm also a board member of the Partnership for Maternal, Newborn and Child Health. So I work very closely with WHO on MNCH. The point raised by Professor Liu on the convergence is true to an extent, but there are also areas where we're falling, particular maternal mortality, so progress is stagnating if not reversing, and on other areas of SDG 3. So I wanted to put the question maybe both to Professor Liu and Dr. Ma. With the sort of innovations on climate finance, is there a way that a similar system could be leveraged for accelerating action on health? Has that already happened? Are there examples, or what would it take to utilize a similar mechanism to really kickstart or reinvigorate and accelerate action on some of those SDG targets that we're at risk of not meeting and even reversing progress on? Thanks.
Okay. Another one more, I guess. Yes, this lady.
Hi, my name is Avery. I'm also a student at Tsinghua. My question is based on my own experience here. I haven't been here for 10 years like many others, but I have been able to appreciate the lack of pollution in Beijing. However, anyone who lives in Beijing knows exactly when winter is happening. We call those like the cold days. It's the days in which pollution goes into Beijing. And while Beijing has done massive improvements in the lessening of pollution, the question still is how do we spread this lack of pollution in other cities? Because I think it was the carbon brief that recently released that China is still 56% reliant on coal. And it's when we switch to winter, we power the coal to warm the people that we really see pollution come back to Beijing. And we see cities like Wuhan and Guangzhou get into the most polluted cities in the world. So my question is how is China, I personally don't know, so I'm just wondering, how is China trying to move away from coal without compromising the comforts in which coal brings? So obviously it heats us and it brings money, but how do we shift towards a healthier air for everyone and not just Beijing? Because everyone looks at Beijing, but the rest of China deserves clean air as well.
Okay, maybe one more. This is the first wave of question. Later we'll have another one. So maybe this, yeah.
Hello everyone, this is Dan from Egypt. I'm interested to know more from Dr. Mahjong about the green finance model. I don't think that the way it works in China that it's only about finance. I think it is more of social, political, required consensus over the need for green transition, right? And you mentioned that you're trying to transmit the experience, the practices to other countries in the global south, where I don't think there is that much consensus, right, across government bureaucracy, not probably just for political reasons, but I think like probably they haven't got to this level of urgency for green transition as like in China. So when you go there, you just like sort of preach financial products, or you also engage with the policy framework that is adopted by this country, or do you have sort of like whole of government approach to make to enable the transformation? Thank you.
So maybe from Professor Liu to answer this question. This is the first wave of questions.
Well, I'd like to respond to a question raised by Martin first, also related to the question you raised. You know, why the world, many countries seem to do better in controlling for pollution relative to the control of climate change. I think at least there are two reasons behind it. One is the area-specific issues. When we talk about pollution, it is much more localized impact as compared to climate change. Therefore, you know, people, governments would be more responsive to that. I think that's one factor that I can think of why our progress is greater in controlling our pollution as compared to climate change. Second reason behind it is more general limitation for human beings in general. Because we humans are more sensitive to something that we can feel, we can see, than something, you know, you don't see it and you just wait until it comes to you. Oftentimes it will be too late. There is a famous Chinese saying, 温水煮青蛙 meaning the boiling frog gradually. When the frog understands the problem, it will be too late. So for climate change, remember years ago, when well-developed countries were talking about climate change, many developing countries, including China, as I still remember, were talking about, rights and responsibilities between our less developed countries and well-developed countries. And now we are actually much more responsive and responsible for the actions that could help control for greenhouse emissions. So if we think about our actions to tackle on climate change as well as pollutions, actually, when you think about who would suffer the most, it is actually the poor, because the poor people are more exposed to extreme weather. The poor people are less capable to adapt to changes in weathers. And poor people usually would perform works in an environment where they can do nothing about it. Well, people like us can stay in office, and we have air conditioning. So actually, in a long run, the poor countries can benefit more from our joint actions to tackle on climate change. We certainly cannot wait too long to be too late. Think about if we let our behaviors to continue as the way we have been till the end of the century. According to some estimates by scientists, the high temperature conditions would kill over 10 million people worldwide just by the extreme weathers, which is like more than some of all the infectious diseases that could kill people globally. Okay? So it's not something we can wait, even though we don't see it as compared to pollutions. So that's how I would respond to your question, why we do not seem to be successful in climate change as we have been tackling on pollution controls. But back to your question, why if there is anything we can do from health policy standpoint or from other government actions perspective to better serve the poor population. As I said earlier, if we can better control for the emissions of greenhouse gases, okay, I think that would directly benefit the poor more proportionally to the rich, almost in any countries, I think. So of course, health policies also have more specific actions to target specific disease conditions. But on the climate change issues, I think the disadvantaged groups will directly benefit more from it than the rich groups, I think.
It's quite impressive what you said about the poor people will be the more vulnerable group in the so-called deficit of global governance, especially on the health crisis about climate change. We have done a very interesting event on March 8th. That is International Women's Day in China. It's about the gender equality and climate change and biodiversity. I remember people say that the biodiversity and the climate change impact much more serious on the female than the male. You know why? As like you said, the female, their environment more explored in those vulnerable ones. So the same, I echo what you said, and that's why I was wondering sometimes Chinese government conducted the so-called common prosperity, not just on the economic side. It's also on the social side, and to move forward the green transition, to do the reduce the climate change impact, also for the vulnerable people and the poor people. I think this is part of the common prosperity, so-called. Thank you. So maybe I move to Professor Ma. Can you answer some questions? Thank you.
Thank you. I guess first one from Martin really is how much hope we have of still achieving 1.5 degree or maybe heading towards 2.7. I think the chance of keeping it at 1.5 is very, very low. We today here you're talking about 1.4. Yesterday I heard someone seems to be quite credible saying it's already 1.5 increase. So the budget is completely used. And now we may still have a chance to keep it at 2.7, which is sort of the medium forecasted by a lot of specialists by the end of this century. And even 2.7, it requires us to make a lot of efforts. If no efforts are made, I think we're going for 4 to 5 degrees increase in temperature. Now, specifically, I think 3 sets of efforts. One is policy, one is technology, and one is financing. So I'm not saying finance is the only thing. Financing is one of the 3 big pillars to address climate issues. In policy, there's so many different things. That's why we need so many groups coordinating policies, harmonizing. And I just give you one of the examples in my speech of coordinating the standard setting for green. So we can channel, money to green activities with less transaction cost and less cost of labeling, verification, and so on. And technology, I think, is very more important. We really need breakthrough. And with the current technology and with the current amount of money, we're not going to go very far. We need new technology which are not available today, and providing green energy at a much lower cost, and can be adopted in many different scenarios. And now back to one of the questions on coal. I think the key difficulty for stopping coal usage in the short term is the alternatives, namely solar, wind, and maybe hydro. They're unstable. When you put them on grids, the majority of them are not usable, and you need to put in the storage to stabilize the power. And storage is very expensive, sometimes 2 to 3 times more expensive than the solar wind power itself. And so I think the solution is really massive investment in storage. Not just one type of storage, 100 kinds of storage technologies that can be used in different scenarios, different conditions, and so on, so that hopefully in 5 years' time we will have stable renewable energy and they be used on a massive scale. Now, I think one question from someone is whether the Chinese experience is relevant, right? In China, it's more like top-down, and the government said, let's do this, and everybody does it. And in other countries, including other developing countries, it's not the same. And now the lesson I've been sharing with them is that try your best to convince your bigger boss that this is important, instead of your ministry. And many of these things requires inter-ministry coordination. Even within China, Green Finance Guidelines, I said we had 7 ministries coming together: the central bank, the Securities Commission, the banking regulator, the finance ministry, the environmental ministry, NDRC, and a couple of others. So if only one ministry takes the lead, you don't go very far, because the resource you have is so limited. And who is going to organize all 7? It's not me. I need to seek support from a high level, and they will convene the 7 ministries. We can do the working level, communication, technical design, and so on. So convincing your big boss is very important. And sometimes you have to scare the boss. The boss may not fully understand the importance of this issue. And tell him, using statistics, using analytics, using other country example, peer pressure, that this is really important for you right? To be a credible leader, to be in your position for longer, to address this environmental climate issue. Otherwise, you will face a lot of trouble. This is the kind of lobbying that we need in any country, and in other countries maybe through different political channels.
This is the role of think tanks.
The role of think tank and yeah. And I'll just give you one example how to reduce the coal. We tried a couple of years ago to convince the Pakistani government that they should not ask the Chinese to build coal power plants in Pakistan. So instead of focusing only on the China side, don't give them the power equipment and so on. We tried to ask them not to ask for this. And how did we do this? We did analysis and telling the Pakistani leader that if you invest in coal-fired power generation, most of your assets will become bad loans in 10 years' time. We did a quantitative analysis, which with modeling and all the credible data. I think they realized this is a problem. Of course, next few years we may have power, but 10 years later we're left with a whole bunch of bad debt, and your banking system may be in big trouble. So this kind of analysis sometimes is useful.
Let me add one more point for your reference. You're trying to come up with strategies to tackle climate change. We are social animals. We are not really as rational as neo-economics assume. In many cases, we are very irrational, and we are short-sighted in many cases. Let me tell you why I stress this. Now, we've been told again, and again by scientists that flying an airplane is actually much safer than driving a car. We never believe it because we imagine that when the airplane is crashed, it's very likely that we would die. But the probability of the airplane to crash is much less than when you drive, or even when you ride the bicycles. But our, irrational behavior tend not to follow that. Now, why I raise this point? Think about the risks of using nuclear energies as opposed to coal-based power stations and other traditional power sources. Many people believe the nuclear power stations would be too dangerous because once it has a problem, it would be a disaster. Now think about the chances of having such a catastrophic problem, which is very, very low. Okay, so based on what I have read so far, I could be wrong. I'm not a energy scientist. Based on what I have read, nuclear power may be the solution out of our challenges right now, because we know we should not continue to use fossil fuels like the coal, because it has so many problems for pollutions, for greenhouse emissions. But it's so cheap, right? We know we can use solar power, we can use wind power, but as Dr. Ma said, it would cost you a fortune to save, to store in panels. That's almost impossible to supply the power enough for the Beijing city. Okay. Therefore, at least the scientists believe nuclear power is the way out. So if we really can think this through to overcome our misled, perception of the risk associated with nuclear energy, as opposed to other sources of power, I think we might be, able to invest more in developing nuclear powers. I think right now France, I think it has the most nuclear power sources in the world. I just want to add this point. I could be wrong scientifically, but I know we're not a rational animals. In this regard, I think the behavioral economics, which is a relatively new field to help us better understand the world, that might be something we should learn more about it. Once we learn more about behavioral economics, and we can help correct it for our misconception of something that is not what we really believe to be, and then we can better deal with the challenges facing us. Just want to add that point. So if you are going to study economics, I strongly suggest that you take a course of behavioral economics. This may help you to overcome the risks that usually tend to be overestimated by irrational animals like us.
I have to comment on that.
Okay.
Coming from a generation that was fighting against nuclear power.
Oh, you do? Okay.
In Germany.
That's good. It's good to hear.
The reason is much less, despite Chernobyl and all these disasters which that happened. One of the main reasons was that we produce waste that generations, many generations down the line fear with. Very dangerous waste. So I think it's not just, you're right, we're now reconsidering the discussions because obviously nuclear power doesn't produce the greenhouse emissions. But it creates other problems which you shouldn't create. So that's not an answer to your question, but I think we need to be more careful because there's also variables, especially beyond the sheer rational kind of power.
Well, I already said I'm not a scientist, so don't count.
That's okay. Let's have another round of questions. Yes, please, Esther. And the next one is with the lady. And yeah, last one. Okay, maybe. Ask the microphone. Introduce yourself briefly.
I'm Yafet. I'm studying Chinese at Tsinghua in the United States. My question is addressed to Dr. Ma. You were mentioning during your talk about the new green infrastructure, especially international engagements. Most of the groups you mentioned were European or developing nations. And coming from the US, I'm curious, have you experienced difficulties working with the US on these issues? Have you tried to work with the US on these issues? And I guess specifically over the next 4 years, do you think there might be a change in the relationship?
Thank you. Good afternoon. My name is Miran. I'm an Egyptian diplomat. Yes. Yeah, with such prestigious company and delicious food, I definitely have an appetite for questions. So, with regards to the controversial digital green nexus, some actually view digital transformation as a challenge to climate action, as it increases the consumption of energy, while others see it as a way to liberate the green innovation when it comes to climate action. So, where do you see the coming on ground with the great competition between global powers to achieve the digital transformation? Where do you see artificial intelligence and where do you think we stand when it comes to the climate action while using the digital transformation and AI tools? Thank you.
Thank you. The third question. Lady. Maybe we have more after you. As our, the last question.
Good afternoon. I'm Bailu from China.org.cn. So I'm a journalist. I got to ask a question from the perspective of media. Yes, just now the two scholars have mentioned the challenges in both global health and climate change, which needs global leaders. However, who gonna to be the global leaders? The U.S., of course, under the Trump administration, maybe not be the leaders. And obviously, they don't want China to be the leader. So what kind of role China should play in this sector? And how should we, as media, to introduce China's actions, China's roles, China's efforts in this sector? Thank you.
Maybe there another question, last one. Anyone would like to ask? No? Nobody? You? No? Okay. No any question? Maybe, okay, this is our last round. From you. This is Mark.
The question on U.S. and we did have some collaboration between China and U.S. on green finance, especially starting from 2021. That was a year the G20 Sustainable Finance Working Group began to be co-chaired by China and U.S. Before that, it was co-chaired by China and UK. So I was co-chairing that working group initially for 2016 to 2022. So there's a period which I co-chair with both UK counterparts and US counterparts. So a few years later, when Janet Yellen, the Treasury Secretary, came, she had a conversation with us, and she, I think, only gave one example of a good US-China collaboration, which is this one, the G20 Sustainable Finance Working Group, co-chaired by China and US. It's not about bilateral collaboration, it's about China, US taking leadership in driving global consensus on how to shape the global sustainable finance framework, including standards, disclosure, and tools, and so on. So we had quite a few documents coming out under Chinese and US leadership. For example, the G20 Sustainable Finance Roadmap 2021 and the G20 Transition Finance Framework 2022. So these are the good examples. But I think going forward is going to be very challenging, given that there's a lot of speculation of Trump will sort of retreat or accede to the Paris Agreement again. And under that assumption, it's quite obvious that the U.S. will be much less involved in international rulemaking, policy dialogue on climate-related stuff. And that answers your question, which is it requires other countries to take greater leadership. And in terms of size, commitments, and I think China and Europe should take stronger leadership in climate-related areas, including climate finance. And one question on AI, I think someone was saying, is AI leading to more problem for climate? Because indeed, I think someone saying AI is now using 2% of power. In the future, with 10% of power will be used by AI or digital solutions, so consumption of energy will go up. But at the same time, I'll tell you, AI can save energy. Once it's applied to many sectors, in steel, in petrochemical, in building. Just in the building sector, I had a conversation yesterday with specialists. They say we can reduce power consumption by 20% by utilizing AI and other digital technology. So it's a double-edged sword. And if you use smartly, it can help reduce carbon intensity. And at the same time, we can hopefully decarbonize the data center, which means that let's use energy efficient equipment for powering the AI and also using green power to power AI. So I think AI power eventually become net zero as well.
Yeah. For the leadership, let me give you my advice. The leadership doesn't go with any specific country forever. Leadership should go with whoever to come up with better ideas to deal with the world affairs, including climate change and control pollutions. You are the leaders. We can be leaders, especially you're young leaders. So don't take leadership, from its wording in face. You should really consider leadership to be something that always come with people with great ideas. Okay, so in an international arena, I think we should make a global market to be as competitive as possible. It's like if we follow the notion of competitiveness in economic market by Joseph Schumpeter, competition should always promote the rule of creative destructions, so that the market can be more competitive and more viable than otherwise. So in a global fair market, we also should make the market, global market, as open as possible, as competitive as possible, so that whoever the countries, whoever the groups with better ideas will play a leadership role, period. That's my response.
Yeah, excellent. I think we had the 2 rounds of question. I think it's a sharp enough, and I think those are good questions. You give wonderful answers. Regarding the last question about the leadership, I would like to end at one point. We 2 months ago we were in WTO Annual Forum. Actually, I think this year marks the 80th anniversary of Bretton Woods system. It's very interesting year. Actually, right now the global governance is lagging behind the global reality. The WTO and many other international organizations should be reformed from different angles. So right now, yesterday actually, Trump's, we have one topic like this. The Trump's 2.0 related to the global governance under this context, while China and other global South countries and other EU and many other so-called multipolar world, those parties, how can they play the significant role? In the WTO Annual Forum remind me that, inspired me a lot. The people from US on the stage, they said, oh, you can do by yourself without US people. You still can move forward the WTO and those Bretton Woods system reform. Maybe after Trump administration, we can catch up. We can join it, like the CPTPP, those mechanisms. You guys can do that. So I would like to echo what you said. The leadership sometimes is you can do better for the world with the dignity, right? We can do it, and it not depends on which country, but any country can play the good role on the global governance. Let's encourage it. Like China issued the Belt and Road Initiative, put forward that. So it stimulated the B3W led by US and the EU Global Gateway. I think it's a health competition for global governance. Everybody focus on the infrastructure building. That is perfect. Why not? It's good for the world, good for SDGs. So sometimes leadership is not on the stereotype. It's on the moral side sometimes, right? It's good for the world. So this is one of the takeaway from our luncheon. Maybe you have more, as the time is limited, maybe each of our speaker can end 1 or 2 sentences to conclude this luncheon. Maybe Professor Ma.
Yeah, maybe just add one word on this conversation of so-called leadership, whether it's individual leadership, or it's country leadership, or it's a combination of many levels of leadership. I think it has to be a combination because any individual who is very smart can develop a new idea, and you need to be endorsed. It can never be an individual idea without a platform. So let me give you 2 examples of how sort of a smart people forming an NGO, and eventually they create a global standard. And one of the examples is this ISSB, International Sustainability Standards Board. It started as an NGO with some experiments and studies on disclosure standards for sustainability-related issues, including climate. It's very much like the origin of accounting standard. It came up originally with a whole bunch of individuals, right? But if it stays at NGO, it will never become a global standard. So what they did back 3 years ago, they went to the G20 for lobbying. And I was co-chairing the G20 Civil Finance Working Group. And this ISSB. In fact, the pre-ISSB, before they set up, it was sort of a preparatory group came into us saying, can G20 endorse ISSB to become the global standard? That kind of lobbying is very important. So then you have to understand this G20 mechanism, because G20 is the 20th largest economy in the world. And this group is particularly co-chaired by China and US, which means that they have to lobby China and US to put on the agenda for discussion. Otherwise, nobody's discussed this possibility of endorsing it. And then if you need to go through the meeting with 20 G20 members all endorsing you, you have to do some work before the meeting, right? You know who is going to be opposing you, and you have to explain to them even before the conversation. So after all of this work, which leverages the country power in the global platform, and we successfully managed to get this through, right? The G20 finally said in a statement, which is signed off by the G20 leaders, saying that we welcome ISSB to become a global standard. That process needs to be understood and needs to be used very smartly to elevate individual bright ideas into really global policy and standards.
I just want to repeat what I just said. Only when we can maintain the global market to be open and competitive can we have the power of creative disruptions to lead the world for more innovative and inclusive setting tomorrow.
Okay, thank you all. Let's have a big applause. And the two distinguished speakers and our senior participants from the embassies, from the international organizations. That's great. I think we have a very wonderful luncheon on the very significant topic. We from the health crisis management and the green finance management to the global governance, to a macro vision. Thank you all, especially there are many young people that actually came from overseas. I think most of them have, this is the first time to visit China. I think you will have more experience in China, and hope you have a good impression on China and more neutral ones on China. This is our hope. Thank you very much for your great participation. Thank you all.